Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for our From Renter to Homeowner webinar. I'm Corby Gage, the Executive Director of Coastal Housing Partnership. And with us today is also Kim Pasgage, Program Manager for Coastal Housing Partnership. And we're delighted to have two real estate professionals with us today to share their expertise with us. David Mogid from Village Properties and Kevin Cravens from Guaranteed Rate. So both David and Kevin are part of Coastal Housing Partnership's network, and as part of this network, these real estate professionals make it easier for you to become a homeowner by reducing your closing costs, and they will reduce those closing costs because you are employees of member companies. So there's a nice savings if you're using someone within network, and both David and Kevin are within our network. The format for today's webinar is I will be asking Kevin and David some questions about the process of going from renter to homeowner. And then the remainder of our time together will be to get your questions answered. We're going to be recording today's webinar, so we'll send you the link to that recording after the session. The webinar format means that your cameras are off, your microphones are off. So if you have questions, and we encourage you to ask questions, we want to make sure that you're getting answers that you need today, put them in the Q&A, and you can ask your questions anonymously if you like. Feel free to put those questions in there at any time during the panel. Kim will be fielding those questions, and then David and Kevin will answer those at the end of our time together. If you have any technical questions, please put them in the chat, and Kim will be monitoring the chat. So the objective for today's webinar is to provide you with guidance on making the leap from renter to homeowner. So congratulations, you're taking a really important first step by coming to today's webinar and getting that education. So panelists, would you please introduce yourselves? David?
Hey, my name is David Mogid, and I work at Village Properties. I've been in the industry for about 10 years now, absolutely loving it. I'm a second generation realtor, so I was lucky enough to be mentored by my mom, who is retired after about 35 years. I have a big background in real estate and construction. The rest of my family is all contractors, so I'm a big resource guy. So nice to meet y'all.
Thanks, David. Kevin, would you introduce yourself?
I'm Kevin Cravens. I've been with Guaranteed Rate for a few years. I am 33 years into the industry, and it's the only thing I've ever done is being a mortgage loan officer since my college days. So this is the only thing I know about talking about.
Great. Well, I know you both, you and David are great on education and counseling first-time home buyers, as well as folks who are move-up buyers, and that's a passion of yours. So appreciate you bringing that passion to today's webinar. So the big question we get asked all the time, and particularly lately, is now a good time to buy a home? So Kevin, with the current housing prices and current interest rates, should someone wait to buy, or is this a good time?
Well, certainly there's been a pain point with interest rates having risen so much in the last couple of years that it has dampened a lot of folks wanting to get out there and buy, seeing where their friends bought 2 or 3 years ago that got really low rates. But there's been a silver lining to these rising interest rates is it's made some houses more affordable in certain areas where you may have saved $100,000 or more in purchase price because interest rates have taken away the purchase power from so many competing buyers. So to be honest, it's actually not a terrible time to be out there and looking at it and getting ready to buy, because these higher rates have given people more opportunity to have a chance to buy a house at maybe a cheaper purchase price. We have an old saying in our industry that You date the rate and you marry the house, meaning that the rate, whatever you get as far as buying, it's going to change probably in a year or two and an opportunity to refinance. But whatever you pay for your house, that is never going to change. It's set in stone. You pay X, it's always going to be X. But your rate, especially now, almost everybody who buys today is going to have an opportunity probably in the next year or two to get into a better situation. So I wouldn't discourage people from being out there and getting ready to go.
Great, that's good news. David, do you have anything to add to that?
He hit the nail on the head with the marry the price, date the rate for sure. But one thing I would always say is Santa Barbara is always in demand, Central Coast in general. So buy when you have the money. It's kind of an old saying. It's buy when you have the funds. When you do qualify, don't wait. Since I started in this industry, every single year, I've heard a buyer say, I'm going to wait for the prices to drop. I'm going to wait, and I'm going to wait. And I haven't seen that become a positive yet after 10 years. So I would just say, do it when you can. And again, you can only benefit later if you're able to refinance.
Great. Okay, well, that's great news. David, so what are some of the advantages of home ownership? Why would someone want to become a homeowner instead of a renter?
Okay, well, there is a lot of advantages. Stability for one, your lifestyle and your finances. When you're living in a rental, you're kind of under the control of the landlord. You don't know when they're going to sell. They don't know if they're going to be able to renew your lease. You don't have a guarantee of staying there forever. And you have no guarantee of your rent actually staying the same. I would say, I think the statistic is rent goes up approximately 4% per year on average. And now with rent control kind of coming into Santa Barbara, I would say that average is going to be growing because it kind of forced a lot of these landlords' hands to start raising rents more often than they were before. So that's also happening. Another benefit is tax benefits. You save on write-offs from property taxes and your mortgage interest. So this is some money that you can actually get back at the end of the year and pay less on taxes. It's also, housing is the best hedge against inflation. It's pretty much the best thing that you can own when there is inflation. So other than, all those, you can also write off your improvements on your home when you sell, or sometimes just per year, kind of depends. You have to talk to your CPA on that, but so much that you put into your home is a benefit. So I would say it is always a risk to rent, and there is some risks to purchasing, but the rewards are so much greater when you own your home.
Great. That's really good information. Thank you, David. Kevin, do you have anything to add in terms of the benefits of home ownership?
Well, sure. It is in California especially, it's such a wealth builder. I think owning a home in California, if you bought, or if you're able to buy now or bought 10 years ago, it becomes kind of our biggest savings account that most of us have in California. Is, we may have a checking or savings and investments, but our house has the ability to just appreciate, once you're in there. And, there's not always an upward trend, but it tends to kind of stay that way. And when you're making a mortgage payment, you're paying principal down, you're putting that money away and it goes into your house and it's safe, as opposed to the stock market, which can really evaporate, or your stock can go to zero. House is always going to be worth something. And if it goes down in value, it's likely to be able to come back. So I'm a big proponent of owning home for that reason. And also another old saying in our industry, whatever you're paying in rent is essentially 100% interest. You don't get any benefit. You're not paying, you're paying somebody else's mortgage, not yourself. When you have a mortgage payment, at least you're paying yourself your own equity into your home. A portion of your payment goes towards your home. So again, 100% of your money you pay in rent is just like 100% interest.
And eventually that mortgage gets paid off. So that's a pretty good rent payment at that point.
Yep.
Okay. So David, what would you say should be your first step in moving from renter to homeowner?
I always think that the first step is figuring out what you can purchase, where you can purchase, how much, which means talk to a lender. They're going to be able to be such a good guide for you. And most oftentimes a good lender is going to help create a process and steps for you to take to see where you qualify or where you can qualify in 6 months from now, 12 months from now. They can kind of create a plan for you. Some people will be able, to talk to a lender and say, hey, you're ready to buy tomorrow. But more often than not, you do need time to progress to that point, building your credit, saving money in the meantime. There's a lot of different steps. And if you find a good lender that can do that for you, it can be a nice, seamless and easy process. So I actually think talking to a lender first is more important than finding a real estate agent first, because you're really going to be in the dark on what you can afford until you take that first step.
Well, that's really interesting, because I think most people would think the opposite, that you want to find the real estate agent, find the property, and then go to the lender. So you really want to start with the lender first. It's kind of a standard first step.
Yeah, if they talk to me first, the first thing I'm going to ask is, have you talked to a lender? Have you been pre-approved? So that's my first step when I'm finding a new buyer.
Okay, great. Well, Kevin, so in addition to the real estate agent wanting to see that pre-approval and see that someone has been to a lender, what are some of the reasons why why a potential homeowner would want to meet with a lender sooner rather than later?
Well, a lot of a time it's easy for us on this side of the computer or the desk to say, you're approved, you're ready to go, you can do this. But I think a lot of times we want to make sure you really can do this. And when you speak with the lender, some of us will give you homework. If you say that you're paying $2,000 in rent now and you think you can afford $3,500 as a housing expense, for example, I'll say, tell you what, next 2 or 3 months, why don't you put $3,500 away a month and see how that affected your lifestyle? Could you still go out and eat and buy groceries and normal life things? And if they couldn't, it was a good exercise. If they could, then first of all, we saved some money for our down payment or whatever, but we've also seen if they really can afford it. Because again, it's easy for us to get you approved, pre-approved, and say, hey, you're good to go, but we want to make sure you are good to go. We'll get to know you. Most of my closest friends from the past 30 years started out with clients. That's how well we as mortgage lenders will often get to know you. We're going to ask you questions that you wouldn't tell your family members or your best friends. How's your credit? How's your income? Tell me all the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we're going to try, as David mentioned, get you on a game plan. We'll try to guide you on if you have potential credit blemishes or things we should attack now. If I can see you months in advance, that's fantastic, or even years in advance to put you on a path. If you have a potential employment change you want to talk about, whether that would affect your ability to qualify, again, we'll try to guide you on what could either help or hurt you in the future. It could be months or years that we're down this path together.
So when you pick up the phone and call a lender, you're saying to the lender, okay, hi, I'm ready to get started. I'd like to get a pre-approval. And then that pre-approval that you get from the lender is the amount of the loan that you would qualify for?
It's a two-step. It's partly what you can qualify for in financing amount, but also your purchase price, working backwards from the down payment funds that you may have available. And I'll just kind of pause and say there really are maybe 3 different levels of pre-approval that we lenders tend to work with. There's a pre-qualification. That's when we've chatted with you on the phone and asked you, hey, how's your credit? How's your income? What do you have to work for down payment? A few other questions. And in a few minutes, we can say, hey, this is your price range, your likely purchase price range and loan amount. You're pre-qualified. And we could write a pre-qualification letter. So if you had to go to an open house this weekend, you have something to work with. The next level, which is a little higher in what we've asked you for, is called a pre-approval. It's where we've taken your paycheck stubs and your bank statements and maybe run a soft credit report, and we've gotten your credit scores. So we have some more to work with. And that level is what we've all used for many years, as David mentioned, to allow them to then move on to working with the realtor and getting the actual car and seeing some houses. And during COVID crisis, you couldn't even get past the front door without having at least a pre-approval letter, as David would probably remind us. And then the third level, which is a real loan approval. There's different names with different lenders, what they call it, but it's beyond a pre-approval. We've actually taken everything from you that we need to get a full loan approval. It's gone through a human underwriting process. We've gotten your tax returns and W-2s, all the things that we've required, up to a certain purchase price. And it's subject to finding a house And David will probably chat with you about later on. The new purchase contract actually lets the realtor show what level of approval you've gone through. And as a buyer, it allows you to be more competitive against the other buyers that haven't gone through the process. Or perhaps in the case of having a real loan approval, you could compete against a cash offer. Your loan's ready to go. And that's as good as a cash offer for many realtor and listing agents. So.
Okay, great. Well, now, what kinds of things do you need as a lender to give someone that pre-approval? Are you looking at tax returns, pay stubs? What do they need to provide so that you can do that pre-approval?
For a non-self-employed person, it's fairly skinny. We're going to ask you for your last couple of years of W-2s, maybe a recent paycheck stub. That's going to give us really the resource for your income. If you're self-employed, it's a little more complicated. We will ask you for your personal 1040s, your tax returns for the past 2 years. We may ask you for a profit and loss statement if you own your own company, or if you own an interest in a company of more than 25%. It gets more involved. We're going to ask you for business returns, things like that. So it really depends on where you are and what your employment is as to what we'll ask for employment. One of the most important things we need to do fairly early in the process, we've got to know your credit scores. Credit scores, they're pretty darn important in buying a house, and they can make or break your ability to either get a loan or get a great loan or get better terms. It can make a huge difference in your qualifying abilities. A 1 point difference in a credit score can make a difference between $100,000 to $200,000 more purchase power than a person that has a lower credit score. So it's that big of a deal, and we'll encourage you to do as we ask. Get you again on a timeline. If you have a blemish in your credit history, you might say, "Hey, can you work on paying this debt down, or can we work with someone to try to get this blemish removed?" It's often things like that we'll see early in the process that we can help guide you to fix things while we have time.
So should someone try to fix their credit score before going to see a lender, or is that something they would do in conjunction with the relationship with the lender?
It's a personal call, but I got to tell you, we've seen, most lenders have seen thousands of credit reports. We kind of know what can influence your credit scores, what won't help you and what will help you. And then certainly there are professional services out there that can help a borrower who really has some, speed bumps in their credit history that we can refer you to that actually do, fix things. But we'll give you guidance on, don't go buy the new car. If you're going to buy a house the next, few months, let's not go get a new $400 or $500, car payment. Or we'd like to see you limit the inquiries into your credit history. The fewer people that are checking your credit, the better off your credit score would be. And I think a lot of people don't understand how much a credit inquiry really can drive down their credit score. So you go shopping for a car on a weekend and you hit 3 dealerships, there's probably 9 or 10 points off of your credit score that, I would like to have avoided if I could have caught you in advance. And I'll give you a rough rule of thumb. For every $100 in car payment or consumer debt or credit card debt or student loan, every $100 in payment is pulling away from you about $15,000 worth of house purchase power. So $400 car payment, $500 car payment is $60,000 to $75,000 house that we simply can't reach anymore because of that. So those types of things, your lender is going to maybe guide you in advance, especially on your credit report. Don't close any credit accounts ever unless we've guided you. It will hurt you more than help you. We'll talk to you about the maximum amount of debt you might want to have against a credit card. Just some really intimate details on your credit report that everybody buries. So long answer to your question, Corby.
Well, it's such an important topic, credit scores. I mean, and I hear so frequently that people will say, well, I've ran my credit and I have all these old credit cards. I think I should close these. This can't look good to the lender. And, it's one of those things where that may seem to be right, but that sends your credit score the other way. So, when I hear someone saying that they're trying to do something to improve their score, I usually say, let's meet with a lender first and make sure that thing that you're doing is indeed going to help your score instead of hurt it. So it seems like that's another good reason to meet with a lender sooner rather than later. Now, what about pre-approval cost? Is there going to be a charge to someone going to get a pre-approval from a lender?
There certainly shouldn't be. I can't think of any lender out there that's charging for a pre-approval process, an application fee or credit fees, things like that. It just isn't common in the industry. So generally, you should not see any cost to get a pre-approval. It's a service that we lenders provide to help you along the journey here. So no.
Okay. Now, sometimes I also hear that people don't want to have their credit score or their credit report run because they think that it's going to hurt their score. And so they try to bring in a consumer credit score. So talk a little bit about what the impact of having your credit score run is from a lender.
Great question. It's really something that we come up as a question quite a bit. There are two kind of levels of pulling credit. There's a soft credit pull and a hard credit pull. That's how they're referred to. A hard pull is a lender pulls all three repositories credit scores. There are three bureaus, TransUnion, Equifax, and TransUnion. So there are three credit scoring models that will put out a credit score. Your middle score is your score. We need that only for the highest level of loan approval, the actual loan approval without a house type of approval. Most lenders or many lenders now will let you do something called a soft credit pull, and that won't or should not affect your credit scores because it's not a real credit inquiry and it only gives us one credit score to work with. But that credit score is usually enough for us to do the pre-approval and pre-qual levels, but also to see if there's any things that we need to address now versus later. So most of the time, and I can't speak for all lenders, but most lenders now have the ability for you to say, hey, I don't want to have a hard credit pull. How can we avoid that? In the old days, people would bring in their own credit scores from either their credit card vendor gave them a credit score or maybe a car dealership gave them. I've got to tell you, the credit scores that you see often as a person that has a credit card or a car dealership pull are not the same scores that we lenders see. We all use different models, and lenders have to use kind of the highest level of credit scoring model to put together a mortgage. So don't think the credit score you see necessarily is exactly what we're going to see. It can vary a fair amount sometimes.
Another important good reason to go see a lender sooner rather than later. So David, do you often find that someone's ready to buy sooner than they think they might have been able to?
Well, I'm excited to say actually, yes. More often than not, I feel like people are ready to buy and they don't even know it. And I wanted to offer my own personal experience on this. This happened to myself and my fiance. We were living in our, one-bedroom apartment a few years back, and we weren't even really thinking about it. And I was just starting to get into the industry a couple years in. And I thought, you know what, maybe we should start considering home ownership. We're probably a year, 2, 3 years away, and spoke to a lender and realized we're right there. Our income was ready. The one thing that wasn't ready was my fiance's credit. She actually didn't have any yet. So like I was saying before, we were put on a nice game plan and had a roadmap on how to create credit. And I think it was 4 or 5 months later, we were there, we were locked in. We were able to secure our purchase within 6 months of that, brain clicking of thinking, hey, maybe we could buy in a few years. So I thought that was incredible. I had no idea. And also the purchase price that I thought we'd be able to go up to was significantly higher. This doesn't always happen, but I have seen it happen, honestly, more often than not, that you think, oh, maybe I can afford 750, 800. And all of a sudden the lender says, oh, you can go 900 or $1 million, which, in this town can really open you up to more options. So I found that amazing and very exciting.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that story. That is so great. Kevin, what about you? Do you find that, once you've met with someone that they maybe should have come to you sooner because they were ready before the time that they actually showed up at your doorstep?
I do, probably more than you can imagine. Folks come in and believe they don't have enough down payment or they don't have enough income or whatever it happens to be. And if you're working with somebody who can be creative, and we are now seeing for really the first time in a couple of decades, more programs targeted to first-time home buyers, more down payment assistance programs perhaps, or lesser down payment options available to consumers that were not available even months ago. There's a lot of stuff coming on the horizon that we'll talk about in the coming weeks and months that are helping folks transition from being renters to home buyers that don't even know they're out there, don't even know it's available, because it's just not something that the media can portray or that you can kind of read about. So yeah, we see it more than you would think, and it's exciting. I'll give an example, Corby. Your Coastal Housing Partnership Fair in Oxnard a month or two ago, it was in April, we met with folks that said, we're never going to be able to buy, we're never going to be able to buy, and they're making offers right now. So it can happen that quickly, just getting to have that education and see what's out there with limited down payment or whatever the case may be.
That's great news and a great plug for our home buying fairs. They're really a great way to get a lot of wonderful information from so many real estate professionals in one place. So I'm delighted to hear that success story. I always encourage people to, get with a lender sooner rather than later, even if they don't think they're ready to buy for maybe even several years. Because I think that oftentimes people have a preconceived notion of when they're ready or what they should be doing to be ready, or they think their credit's not good and it really is actually quite good, or they think, well, I'm going to be saving up for a down payment or I'm waiting for a promotion, and they may find out that there's a loan program available to them that they didn't need so much down payment. So you hate to look at that and look back and go, oh, I could have bought a year ago. So I have never talked to a lender who has been upset meeting with someone who doesn't think they're ready to buy right away, because that's usually a fun case for someone to work through, is that, okay, let's get your credit in good shape. Let's, see if we can get some credit cards paid off or save some down payment. And sometimes those are the most rewarding home buying situations for lenders. So I think that's a great opportunity for them just to get in and make the call and talk to a lender. So David, let's talk about working with an agent. At what point should a potential home buyer meet with an agent?
I had mentioned that the first thing you do is meet with a lender, but the second thing you do is you meet with some agents. I think it's so important, especially these days, to find a good agent that meshes well with you, that's on the same page with you, and is just willing to go to bat for you. The moment that you start considering, hey, I want to purchase or I want to get in this game, start thinking about meeting with an agent. Because yes, there's Zillow and Redfin, and there's a lot of good homework that people can do now that they couldn't do 10 years ago. But there's just so much that a buyer's agent could provide to you as well. There's listings that are not on the market that they find out through their brokerage. There's more resources that you might not know of. There's just so many things that they can tackle for you to help so that you're just not on your own. I would say, you're not going to want to climb Mount Everest without having a Sherpa, so why are you going to want to go into this home purchasing situation kind of naked and on your own? Get somebody that's going to have your back. And don't forget, a buyer's agent is free for a buyer. We're not charging you anything. We're actually making our commissions from the seller. So when you go in to purchase a home, the commission is created from the listing and not the buyer. So use us and abuse us, because we are here for you. And oftentimes, I'm working with a client, especially a first-time home buyer. It's not going to be a week or two, most likely. It's going to be 3, 6, 9, 12 months. So we're going to set up that game plan, and I'm going to be there for you every step of the way. Or sorry, a good agent is going to be there for you every step of the way, of course.
Well, so often I hear, oh, I don't think I need an agent. I'm going to probably find my property on the internet. Maybe I'm going to save some money by not using an agent. What would you say to that?
I don't think that you're going to save much money by not using an agent. I think you're going to, come into a lot of hardship, because I don't think many listing agents want to work with buyers that are unrepresented, because they're just not familiar with the entire game, and it's going to cause more work for their end. And there's just so much inexperience. So it's actually a big risk for a seller to take on a buyer that's unrepresented. Most agents will kind of let them know that. So, I think it's just really important to find a realtor that has experience, that has knowledge, work ethic, and most importantly, honesty. Somebody that's going to be there and help you and help guide you through the entire process. So, I think this town is small, and referrals are oftentimes some of the best ways to meet agents. But I think it's important to talk to a couple of them, 2 or 3, to see who you mesh with the best. Because you're going to be in a relationship with this person for a while, especially if you're a first-time buyer. So you want to make sure that you can get along with them, spend a lot of time with them. You're going to be spending more time with them sometimes than your own family and friends. So very, very important that you guys mesh together.
That's great information. And it seems to like often that just even knowing what price to offer or what terms to offer for a property are so important that, it's natural for us to say, well, property's on there for 800,000, I'm going to offer 775. And you may be so far away from getting that property. An agent's really going to be able to give you that information and let you know, wow, this property is really well priced. There might be a couple of, other offers. Maybe we should offer above asking. They just know the market so much better than we would do that as just a layperson. Seems like that's a really valuable piece of it as well.
Yeah. And on top of that, it's such a relationship industry that, we can pull comps and see what else is sold. But more often than not, we can talk to the agent on the other end and get so much more information than just scouring the internet to see what else is sold. How many offers are there? Maybe they'll let you know how many have gone over asking price. Maybe they'll let you know, divulge some other information. And so it's so important for us agents to have good relationships with others, because the better that you have, the better reputation that you have, typically that leads to more knowledge, which just leads to, bettering your buyer situation.
Right. So how do you go about selecting an agent? I mean, you mentioned referrals. You mentioned that, there's a lot of that going on in our town because we have a small community. Referrals are really important. What other things should you look for in an agent, and how, are there some interview questions to ask?
Yeah, I mean, I think having experience is very important, but I also think it's really important to have an agent that's active, not necessarily somebody that this is a secondary career for, that they're working one job, but then once in a while they go and sell a house. You want somebody that's out there going on all the broker caravans, seeing every house in person, getting to know all the other agents in town, just having all the expertise and knowledge of every neighborhood. I do feel like local agents have a little bit of an advantage, the ones that got to grow up here rather than some that have, transferred from a different town and have only been here for a handful of years. So I think that's extraordinarily important. Like you said, referral, we're a tiny, tiny town. Sometimes it feels a little big, but man, you can drive 10 minutes one way, 10 minutes the other, and you're out of Santa Barbara. And we're 1 degree of separation from knowing everybody in this town. So everybody knows a realtor in Santa Barbara. Whether they're good or not, that's the secondary question. I think online, there's a lot of great resources. You can easily look up, somebody's reviews. You can find out a lot about somebody just by Googling their name. So there's quite a bit of ways to figure it out. Word of mouth, honestly, to me has always been kind of the best in this town. But that's tough sometimes with first-time buyers. So interviewing 2 to 3 agents is really important.
Good. That's good to know. Thank you. Kevin, do you have anything to add to how someone should select a real estate agent?
You kind of get a feel who's going to jive with your personality and your needs, and not be transactional where it's just about the sale. As you'll find with so many great folks in our area, that you're going to become family. You're going to get to know these people really well. You're going to be in their car together for hours upon hours sometimes, or in house open houses, things like that. I will also add maybe that local to Santa Barbara inventory is a good way to get your offer accepted. I think sometimes, and David will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think sometimes a listing agent will see somebody who's from out of the territory by a long distance or out of state, and they're a little nervous about the follow through and setting up inspections and the various things that happen in a purchase transaction. So always encourage you to find somebody that meets your needs, meets your personality, doesn't feel like it's just about that one sale that's going to be just aggressive enough for you, but also that is part of our local economy in Santa Barbara, Ventura County. It's going to make a difference probably in your offer getting looked at.
Great.
Or you meet them on a friendly webinar here too.
So David, in addition to, knowing what to offer, maybe getting your offer accepted, what's the full role of the real estate agent? Is there a larger role that they play through that transaction?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, mentioned it earlier. We are Sherpas. We are your guides to everything. To go in blind, you're really selling yourself short. So, good agent is a huge resource to a buyer. They have inspectors as resources. They have contractors. They have handymen. They know appraisers. They know everybody in town and every resource that you may need, and great lenders, of course, to who they can refer you to how they can help make this transaction smooth and easy. But it's also, our role is to make it easy on you. It shouldn't be difficult or daunting at all to be in this process. It should actually be quite fun. And that's so important. It's a good agent, as Kevin was saying, is not just focusing on the transaction and the commission. They're focusing on who's in front of them and, how to better this person's life and what they're looking for, and just really finding that, stable communication and that, finding what this buyer is looking for to, again, better their life. So the biggest role is just to make everything easy on you. We pile all the crap on us and you get smooth sailing. So I would say that's the biggest thing that you want to look for.
Right. So you're really, once that offer is accepted, you're helping them with their contingencies and their inspections and making sure they've met all their deadlines, and you're kind of holding their hand through all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to put it. You're holding their hand. I mean, looking for a home does take some time, but I would say, 80-90% of our role comes during the transaction, during that escrow process. And I have a really good flow chart I can, share with anybody that asks, of how much an agent does during a transaction. And it's not, one or two things, but in this 30 days, we're doing 50, 60 different items that, a buyer may not know about, just to keep the process going strong and smooth and easy for them. So I think that's just so important to know. And if a buyer kind of somehow stumbled into an escrow by themselves, I think it would be scary and daunting. And I think, you really need that person there to kind of hold your hand and guide you and let you know that everything is going to be okay in the end.
And depending on what comes out of those inspections, there might be some price negotiations after that. And so even after you've had an accepted offer, you might continue to negotiate. Yes.
So a good and experienced agent should be great at negotiating. And that's also kind of where the relationships in this town come in as well. If you have an out-of-town agent that's representing you locally, it might be tough for them to get on the same page as the listing agent of, what should be asked for. And there's always kind of a fine line of negotiating. Asking too much can often get you nothing. Asking for what's reasonable and fair and health and safety related can often get you most of those requests. So having an agent that's experienced and knows how to negotiate and knows how to do it in a friendly but firm manner can go a long way.
Good tip. Good tip. So how important is it for someone to have their own agent instead of maybe as the buyer using the seller's agent?
I think that's extremely important. I have run into folks who are unrepresented as a buyer and say, oh, I'm just going to go make an offer with the listing agent. And, there's one thing that all of us agents have to have is a fiduciary duty to our clients. We have to go to bat for them. And so for a listing agent that's probably been representing their client for many months, if not years, now have somebody walk in and ask for them to write an offer, although they do have that fiduciary duty to now treat them equally as a client, that's a very difficult process and oftentimes can lead to both parties feeling like they lost, and it shouldn't feel that way. Both parties should feel like they won. So it's just so important to have your own representation. it keeps everything kind of on an even playing field, keeps everything honest and ethical. It's just so difficult. When I've been, asked to do dual agency, I typically try to prevent that and find another agent that would be willing to represent them, because it is a very difficult line to find. And it's not all about just making commissions and doubling your money. It's about making sure the process goes smoothly and that everybody winds up happy on the end. And so that's just so important. You need somebody to go to bat for you and to just be on your side the entire time, or else you're literally negotiating against yourself. You're kind of having like this split personality while in the transaction.
Great, thank you. Well, let's go to some. It looks like we have a number of questions, Kim. Let's go to our attendees' questions and make sure we get those answered.
Yes, we have a lot of questions in the Q&A. This has been such a great webinar so far. I really appreciate all the information shared. So the first question is that this person is currently in a rent to own option. Do you believe rent to own situations are good, and what are kind of the pros and cons of that situation?
I'm thinking, David, is this a good real estate agent question? Or, I mean, maybe you both want to weigh in on this, but let's start with David.
I think it's great to have that in your lease. It gives you the first option, and you're not competing. And in this town, honestly, competition is always high. It doesn't really matter what the rates are. When the rates drop, of course, there's significantly more competition, but it's Santa Barbara. Everybody wants to live here. So if you have a landlord that is looking into that situation for you and giving you that offer, I think it is a good option.
And Kevin, any advice from the lender standpoint, or any thing that they should know about from your standpoint?
Gosh, we saw so many. It's surprisingly a lot of these last year. I would say I had maybe a half dozen just myself in this past calendar year, and have seen more start this year. It's not an uncommon situation. You've been, a great tenant. The seller is like, well, listen, I don't have to fix the house up or get ready to go. I don't have to stage it. You're already there. You like the property. I would recommend that your lender know in advance if you're thinking that I might exercise my option to buy, so we could say, hey, you can start building your down payment as part of your lease payments. There may be some way for us to demonstrate that if you did improvements to the property, that's part of your down payment funds. There are things that we lenders might be able to guide you to allow you to build up more down payment that you might not have thought of otherwise. So I'm a big advocate of these. And I will say also, it can be okay to have your own real estate agent in a rent to own situation. If you've got a friend or somebody you've met that could still be your advocate, the seller doesn't necessarily have to pay that person. You can pay them on your own, or work out something with them. But it is often good to make sure you've got somebody that's beyond just your lender. It's an advocate for you to make sure you don't either overpay, or you don't miss out on an inspection you probably should have done, or you didn't think about, or a disclosure that you should have received that you didn't receive. There's a lot of stuff that's involved in. We did see a few agents involved in our rent to own or lease option purchase transactions in the past few years. And it's really coming back into vogue more than it had been in the past, quite a bit.
Great, thank you.
Next question is, would credit score impact the cost of buying points in order to reduce the interest rate?
Kevin.
That's not a one size fits all answer. It can depend on the loan to value, the down payment that you have, other factors as far as your income level, your loan amount, whether it's Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac conforming loan versus a jumbo non-conforming loan. But quite frankly, credit scores have a greater impact today than they did even 3 months ago, because the two large mortgage aggregators in our country, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, came out with some really unfair, I think, pricing burdens for a lot of consumers as far as how their rates are determined, or how the cost of the rates are determined, in particular to their credit score. So I can't give you a single answer for that question, because it's so not one size fits all, but it does have an impact for sure.
And Kevin, could you quickly repeat how much you lose in house power for every $100 in payment?
Every $100 in consumer debt payment, so not utilities, not things that your grocery bills, gas bills, things like that, but every consumer credit card payment or car loan or even student loans, every $100 is about $15,000 of house or purchase power pulls away from you, and it is huge. So again, if we get to see you in advance, we might say, hey, I know you want to save for down payment, but gosh, if you can get this student loan paid off, we've added $100,000 of house for $20,000 debt pay down. If you've got a car loan or an installment debt that has less than 10 payments remaining or is heading toward that path, we don't count that against you in qualifying. So if I have a borrower who has 15 payments on their car loan and that car loan's pulling away $100,000 of my purchase power, I'm like, go pay down 5 payments for me. I don't got to count that anymore. So that kind of stuff can really translate to a huge enlargement of your purchase power.
And that's $100 a month.
$100 a month, it translates to about a $15,000 difference in your bottom line.
Okay,
Wow.
that's a great formula to have. Yeah.
The next question is, are there any consolidated sources for the down payment assistant programs? If not, who would be able to guide you through the process, a lender or a broker?
David, me?
Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay. There are more down payment assistance programs now than there ever were. And I'll give you an example. There was the Cal Housing Authority here in California that came up with a $350 million program to help folks really come in with almost no down payment. That program lasted 8 days. So a takeaway to answer this question is there's lots of them out there, but they can come and go very rapidly. That's where being in tune with a lender and or a realtor that knows where these things are, where they're coming and going. Get ready. I got to tell you, the people that got this 8-day opportunity, those are the folks that were already ready to go. People who started and applied, during those first few weeks, we thought we were going to have all this option. It went away so rapidly. So getting ready is huge. Your employer may have certain benefits. Let's say that you work for Cottage Hospital or Sansom. There's a down payment assistance programs. It's very, again, specific to your situation. Your income level can greatly affect what down payment assistance programs are available. There's a lot of them out there that didn't exist a year ago.
It's your lender can help you find those, and once they can see your situation and see what fits and matches your situation.
And David, for you, do you need an agent if looking to buy a family member's house?
So you don't need an agent, but I would always recommend having an agent. There are so many things and intricacies that go into this, and it also just depends on family situation. So that, a little bit of a loaded question sometimes, but there's paperwork involved, there's strategic, lending and inspections and all this other kind of stuff. You just want to make sure that you cover all your bases and make sure everybody's happy in the end. It doesn't have to be, as formal as a true transaction because you are working with family. And oftentimes, it just depends on how the family's dynamic is. But if there's more than a one-on-one situation involved, I typically always recommend that there should be an agent, at least as a guide. I think it's really important to just make sure that all of you are doing everything correctly, so that in the end, it's all amicable and everybody's happy.
And would the agent negotiate their fee for that? Is that tend to be a different fee, or is that pretty much the same as the purchase? From
most agents are totally willing to negotiate their fee in that situation because you're kind of coming to them with an already made, hey, I want to buy this house. This is my family member. You're kind of handing it to them on a silver platter. So absolutely a good agent, a strong agent would be totally fine with negotiating that lower, making sure everybody's satisfied with that. But it just makes it so much smoother, especially in the future when, you don't want to buy something from your parents and all of a sudden say, hey, you guys didn't tell us there was a sinkhole under this house. And they said, oh, I didn't know there was a sinkhole under this house. I've seen sinkholes under homes sometimes. So yes, it's just so important to have that agent guide you through the process so that everybody understands what's going on. And negotiating that fee is very easy.
Great, thank you.
And then, hi, Lizette, you're asking about are all realtors familiar with the coastal housing program? And do we have a list of realtors? And in the chat, I put the list of all of our real estate agents that are part of our network, because not every agent is part of our network. So I put that in the chat for you to see our list of real estate agents that work with the Coastal Housing Partnership Network. So I hope that helps you.
You don't have to work with someone within network, but if you do, the agents that we work with and that are on the list that Kim sent out actually credit a portion of their commission back to you as the buyer. So as David said, you're not paying the agent as the buyer. And in addition to that, the ones in our network will actually give a portion of their commission to you. You can put that toward your closing costs. It's several $1,000s, and it's a very nice benefit to have. And David is one of our participants.
Yeah, happy to do so.
The next question is, what first-time home buyers incentives are currently available?
Kevin, you want to do that?
One of the biggest ones that is I alluded to earlier is called an area median income first-time homebuyer program. And as I alluded to earlier in another part of our segment here, there are programs that are designed to help folks that have never owned a home or haven't owned a home in the past 3 years get a better rate and better terms than a person who's owned 20 homes. We never had this. This is all very new, and it's very income and zip code specific. So it's, again, not a one size fits all answer, but any lender you speak with should know the area median income ability to, where do you plug in the zip code or the address or the county that you're looking in, and what that translates to in savings. And guys, it can be huge. Lately, we have seen some consumers be a percentage point or better in interest rate than a person who's owned a home before. And the qualifications for first-time home buyers, even if a spouse has owned a home and one of the spouses hasn't owned a home, some of these programs still consider you as a collective a first-time home buyer. If you haven't owned a home in the past 3 years, a residence of 1 to 4 units, you're considered a first-time home buyer all over again every 3 years if you haven't owned one. So there are some nuances out there that, again, the media and the things that you can read online, just they can't portray completely a full picture.
Great. The next question says, I am borrowing from retirement for closing costs. At what point should you take that money out? Before or after pre-approval or at closing?
Great question. Never pull that money out until we're ready to close. A lender's going to say, yeah, maybe a week or so. Make sure you know how you can do it, and you've got it all set up, and you've gotten the approval to take your funds from a down payment. But most of us are never going to let you pull your money out until that transaction is ready to close, because we don't want you borrowing early or taking some sort of penalty if there's a penalty involved early, because what happens if an inspection doesn't come the way you want it to and you don't follow through with the purchase transaction. So great question. Don't take the money out ahead of time. You don't need to. We all
the lender will let you know at what time they need that.
Sorry, Kevin, you have these last two questions. Aside from banks, what other types of lenders may be available?
So, we all kind of call ourselves banks. There are banks like, the ABC, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. Those are depository institutions. So those are lenders and they're banks. There are mortgage bankers. Those are lenders that fund off of their own funds or their own credit lines, and the loan may ultimately go someplace else, but they're a mortgage bank. It's their money to make the loan. They're selling the loan to Fannie and Freddie, just like the Wells Fargos and the BofAs and whatever banks are left, Chase and Citibank. And then there are mortgage brokers. Mortgage brokers are a great kind of middleman between either a bank or a mortgage bank and the consumer. And there's so many great options out there, especially locally, whether you're with a mortgage bank, a depository bank, or a mortgage broker. I suspect in Santa Barbara and Ventura areas, you're going to find some good folks to work with.
Sometimes I think, Kevin, people think they're going to pay more if they work with a broker, like there's some kind of a middle person in there. And I've found that's not true? From a lender standpoint, can you speak to that?
I've got to tell you, again, I use these old sayings because I'm old. We're all fishing off the same dock in the same lake. Most loans in America are designed to be sold to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac if they meet the county conforming limits. And rates aren't going to vary much for a Fannie and Freddie loan unless you're a first-time home buyer and you get the special programs. But in general, there isn't a great variance. It might be a little bit from day to day. It just depends on what bucket's being filled for a particular rate or program. In the non-conforming jumbo world, rates can vary more, and that's where you've got to work with a lender and or institution that has the ability to fish off of more than one dock. So, whether we're going to go lender A or lender Z, you want to work with somebody who has lots of avenues to go through. And that's where a mortgage broker and a mortgage bank can sometimes have more options than a depository institution that's using just their own depositors' money. So no plugs or plays there. That's just the way it is.
Thank you.
Okay, two more questions. How would we talked about how you choose an agent, and how would you choose a lender?
Evan, how would you choose a lender?
Again, as David and I have referenced, it's not transactional, certainly not for me. I'm going to get to know you really, really well. Most lenders that are part of the Coastal Housing Partnership, we've been around the block a few times, and you got to get the feel for somebody that's got your best interest at heart, not just the transaction to make that next loan and to make President's Club or whatever it happens to be. It's more about you. And how do you shop for a lender? It's from friends and family referrals, or from your realtor referral who's worked with the lender in particular. Certainly there are ways to find many lenders online, readily available, but it comes down to the personality and the face-to-face, or the ability to reach out and touch them, and the real people that especially in the local environment, I highly encourage. There's some great folks out there that you can choose from.
So is it better to use a local realtor than an e-lender?
David, I'll answer my part and let you answer your part. During the height of the purchase offers, where there were 20, 30 offers, the folks that were not working with local either lenders and or realtors, their offers just simply didn't get looked at. Or the agent would say, listen, if you want to be of consideration, you've got to at least apply. You don't have to use them, but at least apply with somebody local, so we can, know that when so-and-so says you're qualified and you can carry through and do this transaction, you really can. And again, not to badmouth an online lender, but it's a little harder to do, to get that reassurance that a local can do. Same thing with realtors. Working local is a big consideration. If you want to be in the running, locals usually the way to go.
And it doesn't mean you have to go sit with them in their office. It's just that they're a local lender. They have a local presence rather than just an e-lender that you may not be talking to the same loan officer every time you call.
Great. We rarely get to see our person nowadays. Again, we get to see them via Zoom, or certainly they come into the office. But unlike David, who will be in the car with you, we lenders tend to be more on the phone and email. It's so electronic nowadays. We want to get to know you face to face when we can, but it's not required. The old days of you coming in and sitting into your lender's office and us copying the W-2s and paycheck stubs and spending an hour with you, and you had to get a babysitter or whatever to come visit us. Those are over. It's all done largely 99% of the time online, on the phone, electronically, or Zoom calls, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I would second that. Just we're such a bubble here in Santa Barbara. We want locals. As a listing agent and many other listing agents, when they're receiving these multiple offers, if they see Quicken Loans as your lender, they're either going to ignore it. Most likely they're going to advise their seller that this is, there's a lot of trouble with this, or they're going to go back and ask that buyer's agent, can you go get pre-approved by a local lender as well? It's just, those transactions are much more messy, I would say, when you're using an e-lender, rather than somebody, a good lender such as Kevin, or, any other good lenders of town, that are going to be there for you every step of the way. And oftentimes when I have had the unfortunate, escrows with an e-lender, you don't even get the same person on the phone every time. You get somebody almost completely different working in the background. So it's very hard to complete an escrow process when they're not even on the same page all the time. So local is so important for agents and for lenders. I just think that goes a very long way. It's a very relationship-based town.
Great. Kim, does it look like there's one last question or?
One last question. This person is saying, are there programs available if they've purchased a home in the past and they purchased in 2009? I think you said, Kevin, that even if they've purchased something in the last 3 years, right?
If they've had ownership in a residential property, so 1 to 4 units, that's residential. If they've had ownership in the past 3 years, they aren't considered first-time home buyers. But if any one person in the transaction, so let's say that again, I bring in an adult child or a co-borrower who is a first-time home buyer, and we still can fit within the income limits for that program. Again, there's some maximum limits, but if I can bring another person in, we're suddenly all first-time home buyers again. And that's again where an experienced loan officer will know how to kind of massage the nuances of these particular types of very new programs.
And from Coastal Housing Partnership standpoint, we are not strictly a first-time home buyer program. So any lender or real estate agent you see in our network, whether you're a first-time home buyer or a move-up buyer or getting back into the market, you can use Coastal Housing Partnership's savings program. So that doesn't apply to us. We're not just first-time home buyers. We're available to any employee of a member company. Okay, well, looks like that's all the questions. Thank you so much for attending. If you do have questions going forward, you have Kevin and David's contact information here. I encourage you to reach out to them or reach out to Kim or me. We're happy to answer any questions as you go forward, and we wish you success on your path to home ownership. Thanks for joining us today.